Finally, the longest transfer saga of the summer is done and dusted. Alexander Isak, he's packed his bags, he's left Newcastle for Merseyside in a transfer record fee of £130 million, in a move that I think Newcastle fans will be sorry to see the back of him in many ways because of how amazing he was been for the club and obviously the cup hero last season, but with how, heartbreaking and how painful this breakup has become, it's hard to work out from the Geordies' perspective if it's good riddance or, see you later and all the best going forward. Don't really think there's too much of the latter, really, from everything I've seen online, certainly. But really, when you look at it in the cold light of day and we have a look at Newcastle, the dominoes have fell and they have fell pretty sweetly. We've seen Woltemade come in from Stuttgart for a massive transfer fee, as well as now, finally, the protracted signing of Yoane Wissa from Brentford has been signed, sealed and delivered. And now that Newcastle's business is basically all but done for the transfer window, I think surprisingly, they're coming out of this window, despite losing Alexander Isak, better off. A much stronger team, a lot more quality and depth, and they've reinforced the squad in some really important areas. In the video today, we'll have a look at where the Newcastle squad sits now that the transfer window is done, and really what they should be looking at and targeting coming into the Premier League and the Champions League campaigns that they've got after the international window. At any point in the video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And if you're a Newcastle fan, jump into the comment section and let me know your thoughts and feelings on the transfer business now that you can see it in its totality. And if you're a football fan of any other club, of course, feel free to jump in and share your thoughts on the same. But yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one because I twisted up on my tongue far too many times in that intro. It's been a while since we've looked at Newcastle, and I think the Woltemade, or the Woltemade as we like to call him, transfer is monumental and could go down as we see the Premier League season roll out as one of the signings of the year, because one of the big problems with replacing Alexander Isak isn't just having a striker that's got that eye for goal, that has that killer instinct in front of the net, but also is a fantastic team player. For me, peak Newcastle, Anthony Gordon and Alexander Isak was one of the best forward partnerships in Europe, and I don't think there was much getting away from that. We've seen it at Champions League level, we've seen it in crucial matches in the Premier League, and with any team that is successful, it's those bonds between the teammates, it's those connections on the pitch, that understanding, that synergy is what separates, excuse the expression, the men from the boys. The teams that get further up the table, whether that be in a defensive sense, which a lot of people can easily point out and highlight, but certainly you really notice it when you've got that in the front areas, and that is something that is rather priceless that Newcastle have been really enjoying for the last couple of seasons. But in Woltemade, they have got a player that really does fit the bill. This is a guy that, as I'm sure Newcastle fans have kind of got up to speed with already, is a playmaker as well, is a guy that wants to get on the ball and wants to connect with teammates as well. Because of his stature and how good he is in front of goal, is a guy that occupies lots of defenders, and it's going to be a lot of fun for the rest of the Newcastle team to be playing in and around this guy as well. And Newcastle have always been a team, under Eddie Howe especially, they like to go on the front foot and get up the pitch quickly, and a guy like this that's used to playing on the front foot, running up the pitch and initiating counter-attacks, completing them with wingers on the overlap, as well as having good midfielders to kind of try and help out and play with. I think honestly, I know he wasn't the first name that Newcastle were linked with, and there was a lot of other names that he's were linked with, Ekitike and one or two others, but Woltemade was on the verge of going to Bayern. Bayern were ready, signed, sealed and delivered to snap this guy up, and if it wasn't for the fact that Stuttgart were holding out for their price tag, he would already be there, the heir apparent and the understudy to Harry Kane. And I think that example, that comparison, is probably the most apt for anyone that's not familiar with Woltemade. Very similar players, maybe not quite as lethal as Kane, because Kane has shown in his stint at Bayern Munich and obviously at Tottenham previously, but especially at Bayern, that he is world class in the final third. Left foot, right foot headers, he can do it all. Woltemade has certainly got the potential to rise, I think, to being a top 3 striker in the world. I don't think there's too much question around that. And not only is he the perfect guy to come into this Newcastle system, but this is also the perfect system for him to come into, because the way that this guy has done so well for Stuttgart has been link-up play and has been working with really good wingers and high energy and very direct midfields as well. So this is a real match made in heaven for me, where I don't think there's a player in world football, and I would probably just about include Ekitike in that would be able to fill the shoes of Alexander Isak stylistically any better than Woltemade, and I think this is a very good transfer. On screen now, I'm not too sure what to do with the goalkeepers, right, because it's still Pope, but you feel it's going to be Ramsdale as soon as he has a bit of a clanger. But this starting 11 that's on page right now is all Eddie Howe signings, and I've been covering Newcastle and their transfer policy since Eddie Howe came in rather closely, and I've always really admired and gave a lot of props to Eddie Howe and Newcastle, including Alexander Isak, of course, for the style and the profile of player that they've been building. And when they have spent a lot of money, I kind of felt out of turn. It was a wee bit too premature, but I think these are all starting to feel the benefit of it now, of the likes of Lewis Hall and Livramento. There's a squad here that can grow together, that can age together, has some really significant experience under its belt already. And when you take away all the fringe players and all the squad pieces, and you just look at Eddie Howe signings, what a best 11 of that could look like, maybe there's a discussion between Elanga and Yoane Wissa, fine. But this is a Champions League level team. This is a team that if everyone's fit and available and everyone's playing on paper the best way possible, you've really got absolutely a perfect blend of everything. You've got your Italian deep lying midfielder that loves to go box to box and has got a range for passing and a nose for danger. A Brazilian box to box midfielder that, as we all know, is an absolute hero. And then I'm a huge fan of Ramsey. Again, somebody's might be shouting for Joelinton to be in here, but not an Eddie Howe signing, which is just the main purpose of what's on screen here. But I think it's a guy that Newcastle fans are going to get a lot of value out of this year. A huge upgrade on the likes of Longstaff and a higher calibre of a guy than maybe what Joe Willock is. But this is a perfect foil attacking midfielder that was very, very effective, but quietly effective at Aston Villa, that I think will support the front three, whatever it's going to be, very, very well. The back four, young, good profile, big and strong, and a lot of British talent in there as well for you guys. And then Elanga and Anthony Gordon, direct wingers that love to go on the front foot, take people on, and get on the inside and put defenders on the back foot. It's really exciting for Newcastle, and I really wanted to highlight this because of all the kind of negativity and the black clouds around the Alexander Isak thing. And I know losing a guy like that, especially if he does really rip it for Liverpool, will be like, what could have been perhaps. But I think Woltemade has got the ability to really just pick up where he's left off and maybe help the team move on a little bit. And part of that will be down to the individual qualities that he offers that Isak didn't, and he'll have some negatives that Isak didn't as well. It's just the way football is. But I do feel the supporting cast now for Newcastle is a lot stronger than what it's been before. The depth in the forward areas, the depth in defence, and now just about when you add in the likes of Jacob Murphy, Lewis Miley I'm a fan of as well. We mentioned Willock and Joelinton already. There's now a really good level of quality of depth in the Newcastle team, and we've seen, just before the transfer window closed, they changed shape a little bit because they had no strikers and all the rest of it. But I wouldn't be surprised if a little bit of this, especially with the signing of Yoane Wissa, didn't mean that we got some sort of real throwback 4-4-2 action out of Eddie Howe at some point this year, because Woltemade can play in a front two, Yoane Wissa can play in a front two, and Elanga and Gordon can run these channels in off the ball, tuck in to be a midfield four. And the shift that Eddie Howe has always asked of his midfield, Bruno, Tonali and Joelinton in particular, is to cover the entire bloody pitch. So these two guys being involved in an old school 4-4-2, I don't think would be ruled out. And this is something, again, that Newcastle have really been missing over the last couple of years, is the ability to maybe mix some things up and change their style of play. At times we've maybe seen like it would be like Gordon and Isak would be much firmly more the forwards, and then someone like Murphy would maybe be like wing-backish, and there would be that kind of off-kilter thing. And that's still a thing, and still a move they can make, of course. But I think this is a real game changer. If you're away in Europe in the Champions League, or you've had a big midweek, you've got a really important game at the weekend where this could be a valid option for you. Newcastle have really got it in an effective way that would challenge a lot of teams and ask lots of big questions. As well as when you look at the bench, the versatility of players like Harvey Barnes, Jacob Ramsey, Willock, Murphy is incredible. Even Elanga and Wissa, these guys have got a lot of interchangeability across the front line here. The midfield goes without question. And Livramento's versatility at left back kind of gets the defence out of jail, but sincerely, pick the best centre-backs out of that when they're all fit. It's going to be a really tough one for Eddie Howe. A very good problem. A lot of players in different stages of their career, granted. But from front to back, I think Newcastle have really managed the transfer window really well. And I think the negative, the worry of the Isak thing is that someone else repeats this. But Newcastle got the money they wanted. They got £130 million for him. So I don't feel that, from the boardroom or the back office or whatever, I don't feel that anyone's had their pants pulled down here. I don't think Newcastle have got egg on their face in any way. And I think they've managed to come out of this transfer window, despite losing Alexander Isak, actually significantly, and I think that's the point worth emphasising, stronger than what I thought they would have came out of it as, even with Alexander Isak in the building. Because if they did keep Isak, I'm not as convinced they would have really pushed the boat out and got real improvements in the front line like Woltemade and Wissa. Obviously, they wouldn't have bought both of them because they would have still had Isak in, but also bringing in Jacob Ramsey, also bringing in Malik Thiaw. I just think it makes such a huge difference to the whole complexion of the squad. And after the international window, it is battle stations for Newcastle. This is really where the season gets started. The first 3 games have been, let's just forget about them. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. We're going to come out the international break playing Wolves at home, which should be a really good kind of like a real season opener at St James's Park for the Newcastle fans, with the new signings on board, about to welcome Newcastle to Barcelona to St James's Park, which, Lamine Yamal in town and Pedri and a few of the other guys, that should be a really good feast of football for the football fan out there, myself included. And Newcastle got some pretty good results last time they're in the Champions League, so Barcelona, they're very good, but if they had a tough time at St James's Park, I wouldn't be wildly surprised. Maybe a draw is the sort of thing that'll happen there. It's Bournemouth and Arsenal very quickly before playing USG away. But this is the thing I was looking at with this, is that Newcastle's Champions League draw is pretty OP. Outside of Barcelona and right at the very end, there's Benfica, there's Bilbao, Marseille. They play PSG. Leverkusen, who have just sacked Ten Hag at point of recording, PSV as well, and in the final game against PSG at the end of January. Newcastle have got a bunch of pot free teams, and the way that, the Premier League's the Premier League, there's no easy games. They've still got the festive fixture list to get through. There'll be some cup games that diced into this as well. But Newcastle, for me, could quite comfortably get into the top 8 of the Champions League with this fixture list that they've got. And if they do that, they get straight into the last 16. And then once you get into the last 16, really, it's anyone's game, isn't it? It's luck of the draw and who shows up on the night and all that other kind of stuff. And if there is a sniff and there is a whiff, that's the kind of year that Newcastle are on, the January window could be extra powerful as well. So I think, Newcastle have certainly got a lot to be optimistic about. I think the squad is really well rounded to cope midweek and weekend with Premier League and these Champions League fixtures especially. And we've seen it with Eddie Howe, a really strong defence, a really formidable attack. He's now got the depth in place to really just float all of that across the season, regardless of an injury to a centre-back and suspension to a midfielder, and this winger isn't on form anymore. All the stuff that Newcastle have had to juggle for the last 3 or 4 years, it feels like all the lessons and all the kind of battle scars that they've been earning is maybe just about all going to come together. And I know it did pay off last year with the cup win, don't get me wrong, but this year, finishing in the Champions League spots again in the Prem, having a monumental Champions League campaign. Let's not talk about domestic cups just yet. Let's see how they roll out. That would be a huge step, a huge chapter written in this Newcastle kind of journey that has been going on for the last couple of years. So I'm really excited for Newcastle. I'm really glad that they've come out the transfer window signing high quality players in numbers as well. You hate to see teams like Newcastle get their pants pulled down with a star player leaving, and then the board of the club either wimping out and not really replacing them properly, or being caught on the hop and not really having the replacements lined up to get the job done, and then they end up weaker as a result. So, good on Newcastle, well done to them, and I'm looking forward to following them for the rest of the season, see how they get on Champions League and domestically. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Is this going to be the real emergence of Newcastle now that the transfer business is done and they can focus on the pitch? Are the new recruits going to be good enough? Are they going to have a monumental Champions League campaign? Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. On screen and now some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, hit like if you enjoyed the video, of course. Stay out of trouble, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.